I want you to imagine that you are dying and you're coming towards the light and you come face to face with Jesus. In that moment of seeing God, I wonder if your preconceived theologies, ideas about God, even the pain and worry and anxieties and troubles that you experience day to day would just in a moment vanish. Like they seem to for all the people in the Bible who have these appearances of God. I've been reading through these and studying them. Some of them fall face down, and some, like Job, say, therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Completely blew him out of the water. All of these arguments he had through Job with his friends, everything is gone in an instant. Everything is just blown away. How many of you guys struggle on a daily basis with pain? I know my grandmother had rheumatoid arthritis, and a friend here in the church was telling me of a 3-year-old who had rheumatoid arthritis, and everybody just thought this kid was cranky all the time, and it turns out that they had this ongoing pain. I found this beautiful Pakistani girl who has a condition, a very rare condition, that leaves her in just constant pain. And for those of us maybe who live like Job did, I wonder if constant pain is a bit like having a mirror in front of your face, where it's always reflecting back to you your own condition. Dr. Paul Brent, who worked with leprosy patients in India, talked about how when you're thinking about the pain, you feel it more. So maybe all of you are thinking about your pain now, and you're like, oh, I can feel that. I've got a little bit in my lower back from lifting these speakers up with Greg yesterday. Maybe you're all feeling it a little bit more as you think about it. As we concentrate on the condition that we're in, maybe that's how it is. We feel that condition. We think about it more. But then in one instant, we see Job sees face to face with God, and everything is completely blown away. He feels his awe, the power, the grandeur, the majesty. And it's like all of what he was experiencing, all of that suffering, just vanishes away as he sees the awe and power of God. In that moment of awe and grandeur with God, Job experiences that everything that he had as a theology, he just throws it out the window. All of his ideas that he had about God, everything is gone. And yet, with that experience of God that he has, it's a little bit like my kids with their new kitten. My kids got a kitten this week, and I cannot count the amount of times I've told them to stop stuffing the kitten in the couch, stop stuffing the kitten into the toys, stop putting the kitten in a pillowcase, please do not put the kitten in the box, please do not lift the kitten by his one leg, please do not pull the kitten's tail, please do not stop. And all the time, their control over this kitten is forceful and powerful. Yet in Job's case, it isn't like that. It's like he's just been set free. We've been set free. God, in all of his grandeur and power and majesty, does not control us, does not stuff us into little boxes, does not push us and prod us and pull us like those kids do with their beloved kitten. But he sets us into the wide ocean of freedom in this world, to not even believe in him, to have completely wrong theologies about him, to make arguments like the friends of Job do. Yet, we see in all of that a wager that Job is going to love God for God, and not because of what he got. At the beginning of this book, what do we see? We see that the challenger, the accuser, comes towards God and says, oh, well, sure, Job loves you, and sure, these people love you. It's just because of what they get. That's the only reason they're in it. It's not because of this relationship you imagine you have with them. Take that all away and let's see what happens. And I see with Job, in his words, even after it's all taken away, an intimacy and a recognition of maybe intimacy lost. Listen to this. Oh, that I were as in months past, as in the days when God watched over me. When his lamp shone upon my head, and when by his light I walked through through darkness. I wonder if in the dark times of his life, if he felt like God was present in those depressing times, in those hard times that he'd been through. I wonder if he felt like when he was in danger, he felt God's presence with him. He says, just as I was in the days of my prime, when the friendly counsel of God was over my tent, when the Almighty was yet with me. Why do you hide your face and regard me as your enemy? He says now. It's like he expresses this absence he feels of God. When all this comes down on him, it's like he feels like this presence of God has left. This intimacy has gone. And the friends of Job have great theology, don't they? They accuse Job of, well, obviously, there's something that you just haven't confessed yet. Clearly, God wouldn't do this to you if you just would confess your sin, Job. Stop being so arrogant. Stop living in denial. Would you please just be honest with us and honest with God? It's a little bit like the great theologians we have on TV, isn't it? You probably can't read that, but this one says, sow your $1,000 triple favor seed, and get this, receive God's unstoppable favor. Anybody here who wouldn't want to receive God's unstoppable favor? It'll only cost you $1,000. That's a pretty good deal. And you'll get unstoppable favor from God. Imagine that you could just do something. You could just please God enough, and then you'll get his unstoppable favor. That's what they seem to promise. Listen to this one, Eliphaz. This is the first to come to Job. What a name, too. It sounds like elephant or something. But he claims that he's had some kind of vision. Some kind of powerful vision from God that's just inspiring him to say all these things. Listen to what he says. I saw a spirit pass before my face that made my hair stand up. See, this isn't just me talking. I'm divinely inspired here. And listen to what I say. He says, whoever perished being innocent. He gives rain and water on the field. He sets on high those who are lowly. But if I were you, I would appeal to God. I would lay my cause before him. As if Job hadn't done this yet. As if Job is just completely in denial, won't admit his sin, won't be honest with God, blames it all on Job. What an awful thing for Eliphaz to do. My kids, once in a while, get to watch Paw Patrol at home. And, maybe they're sick, or they've been running outside, they're really tired, or I'm just throwing something on the oven. I might put on some Paw Patrol. This is pretty much their favorite thing, okay? Now, often before they watch Paw Patrol, they have to get their room cleaned up, or, teeth brushed or something, and I'll say, hey, if you don't do it, no Paw Patrol for you, and man, you'd be surprised how that just gets them in gear. Now, in my kids' imagination, they could develop a really great theology about this and say that, hey, if I'm good all the time, I could just watch Paw Patrol nonstop. And if I'm bad, that's why Dad takes it away. But really, it has very little to do with that. This is not an equation. If I let them watch Paw Patrol all the time, it would rot their brains. If I took it away every time they were bad, then I wouldn't get supper made sometimes. It's not an equation. And yes, God blesses us and rewards us for our righteousness. And there's also a sense of punishment that we read all through the Old Testament and that we sense today, that there are natural consequences, there are punishments from God. But that doesn't mean, the equation doesn't extend, that whenever you're suffering, whatever pain you're in, is probably because you caused it through your unrighteousness. That's what his friends claim. Job senses that this equation isn't working, and he starts to pull it apart later in Job. Listen, he says, well, then why do the wicked live and become old? Yes, become mighty in power. If we're getting all that we are because of being righteous, then why do these wicked people get all this good stuff? See, listen to this. He says, their descendants are established with them in their sight, and their offspring before their eyes. Listen to the pain in Job as he says this. Remember what happened to his children when the Chaldeans and these people just came and raided everything he had? They were all killed. He says, well, they've got all their kids, haven't they? They've got their offspring. He says their houses are safe from fear. Neither is the rod of God upon them. Clearly, Job is interpreting everything that's happened to him through their lens. That, yes, God is punishing me. He is doing this to me. This is the rod of God upon me that I've been attacked. But he says, listen, their children dance and they sing. to the tambourine and harp and rejoice in the sound of the flute, if all these wicked people are having all this, and they spend their days in wealth, and in a moment go down to the grave, yet they say to God, depart from us, for we do not desire the knowledge of your ways. He breaks apart this equation. It's like this wall that they're building around him of accusation and judgment. And he breaks it apart and says, listen, the wicked, they get all kinds of good stuff. This isn't just an equation, he says. This isn't quite what it appears. He concludes by saying, what profit do we have if we pray to him? And he gets right back to that idea of profit that we begin the book of Job with, where that great challenger, this accuser, comes up and says, hey, listen, they're only into it for what they get. Now, as the reader, we can see that this equation doesn't work. We can see it doesn't work because we have a behind-the-scenes look at Job. We know what's going on. We were told right in the very beginning of Job what's happening. And it isn't what any of the friends think. It isn't what Job thinks. Something completely different has happened, but we know that they don't. But for Job, he's in the middle of it. He's stuck in the middle of all of his suffering and pain. And in order to show that God can be loved by people and show his love to people, not just based on what they get, we need somebody like Job who's going to go through what he went to prove it. But listen to how he feels. He says, my hope he is uprooted like a tree. He has also kindled his wrath against me and counted me one of his enemies. My bone clings to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. That's where we get this expression, skin of my teeth. He sees that this equation from God has left him absolutely destroyed by God. He feels like all of that things that his friends are saying has left him just destroyed. And we see in this book here a completely beautiful story, different from all the others. I don't know if you knew this, but in the ancient Mesopotamian times, there was many stories like Job. They have this rich man who's blessed, and then he undergoes all kinds of suffering from the gods. This is a common story they've been pitching around in all the cities and all their different religions. Yet in each of those Mesopotamian stories, the reason has to do with the main character. That he's just not offering the right kind of sacrifices. See, they believed that these gods were needy. The needy gods required that we give them enough ritual and vindication to honor them, and then maybe they'll consider giving us some kind of reward or look our way. Now, the story of Job is entirely different from all of these, and it turns absolutely upside down this equation, this idea that we can just get from God by being good, or that the reason that we're experiencing evil is because we were evil and we brought it on ourselves. He turns this upside down and says, no, God is not just rewards and punishments or an equation, and we can know God in a different personal way beyond that. It's about a relationship with him. We can know God beyond all these blessings, and we can experience him beyond all that. Yet, when we're in the midst of whatever we're going through, especially if it be chronic pain, we tend to ask questions like, God, why me? Just like Job does. Job says, cease, leave me alone, that I may make, it's a mistyping. Cease, leave me alone, that I may take a little comfort before I go to the place I will not return. Why have you set me as your target, so that I make a burden to myself? Why then do you not pardon my transgression and take away my iniquity? You see, he admits that he's not perfect. He's not so arrogant that he thinks he has no sin. It's not that he lives in some kind of a fantasy world like his friends accuse him, but he also realizes that he's not hiding anything from his friends. He's not hiding anything from God. He hasn't done something that would bring this on to him that he's just not admitting. He recognizes that he is somebody who has sinned, but there's something more going on. He feels like he's been treated unjustly. He says, does it seem good to you, and he's talking to God, that you should oppress, that you should despise the work of your hands? And he says to his friends, he tears me in his wrath and hates me. He gnashes at me with his teeth. My adversary sharpens his gaze on me. And if you take that equation, this religious equation with God, that's exactly what you will also feel. That God hates you, and that's why he's punishing you. Because you won't see the reason behind what's going on. You'll get stuck in this mirror of looking at your own pain and then asking bad questions. Now, you've probably been to some kind of a course, or maybe in school, they wanted to encourage people to ask questions, right? So they said, hey guys, there's no bad questions here. Has anybody heard that before? You can't ask any bad questions. I disagree. I think there are some terrible questions out there. I brought some dumb questions up here. Here's a dumb question somebody asked. Does it take 18 months for twins to be born instead of 9? I think they asked that in all sincerity. This one was asked in sincerity too, and this is a terrible question, asked in sincerity. How do I communicate with blind people? Like, obviously there's Braille, but is there some form of clicking I can do with my tongue to simulate Braille verbally? This person is asking an absolutely terrible question. And in the blindness of our pain, we're going to ask a really terrible question, this one. This question has no answer because it's a terrible question. And people all over the internet ask this question, and they put up memes. They say, look at this deformed person, proof that there's no God. If there's so much pain, of course there's no God, because they're asking the wrong questions, just like Job was. Job was asking all the wrong questions. And then he has this appearance of God that blows all of these useless questions that really can't be answered right out of the water. And he sees God's glory. And there isn't now all these questions of God, why me? Or God, you should be doing things differently, or if only you were just, you'd see that you should act this way. He says, wow, in your wisdom, you know what you're doing, and I don't. He admits, I shouldn't have even opened my mouth. I shouldn't have uttered a word. I shouldn't have spoken. Because you know what you're doing, God, and I'm not on the same level as you. I was thinking about this for a church, and for us as individuals. How could we have a vision of God, something like what happened to Job, that would just take us away from all the things that we get stuck on down here? Whether we're stuck on our pain or our own troubles or the grumbles that we have with other people or the things that seem like big deals, but they really aren't. How could we get that kind of vision that would lift us, like lifting the mirror away did for Job? Lifting the mirror of all of our pain and problems and just seeing God. How could that happen? Well, I realized as I started to think about how this might happen for us as a church or individuals, that to see God in his power, to see his deliverance, to see that he can rescue, we have to go first from a place where we maybe are in the pit and recognize our need to be rescued. I've had some pits in the last little while. I could say that my life is the pits. I could say that I am not happy about getting sick this week, or that my family got sick, or that they've now got to run to the mainland last minute. They just got the doctor's call. I'm not happy about a lot of things that have happened. And I can feel, though, when I'm in those moments of, I'm in the pits, that when I reach up for God, it's in those moments where I can feel his strong arm to lift me out of the pit. It's in those moments when we're down and we experience our need, not the places where we feel great and self-confident and self-sufficient and righteous like his friends did, but the place where Job does, where he's made ready to see God. He's made ready to experience God's power. When we experience God's power, and we see his majesty, his splendor, when we see the size of him, the funny thing is we're not seeing the whole biblical view of God's glory. Because when we look at the Bible as a whole in the revelation of God through God visiting us in Jesus, we see that the glory of God is actually the cross. Now, what a paradox to say that we see the glory of God in the cross. We think of glory as something expansive and huge and impressive and powerful. And this paradox of the cross shows us weakness and pain and suffering for our God. Yet that's what the Bible says. It says that this was the glory of God, was the cross. It says that Jesus made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, and being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. In other words, this mighty, grand God suffered, became like us, took on all the suffering that me or you or Job ever experienced on himself. And in that moment, not only took that to destroy it forever when he comes again, took all of our unrighteousness and defeated our unrighteousness, defeated death, but also has given us a new way to live. Now, these Mesopotamian stories that I talked about, the ones where I told you about needy gods who require that their subjects do religious rituals that you hear about all through the different city-states and kingdoms, they have a completely different God. That God requires that they worship him because he's so needy. They require his veneration. And he's unpredictable. You never know if you're going to get the rituals just right. Now, this is interesting. There's no concept of the gods desiring righteousness in the Mesopotamian kingdoms. They didn't want righteousness. They just want those religious duties. They just want a little bit more fame. This isn't our God at all. He's not needy. He doesn't require us to worship him. He has no needs at all. And nor does he stand indifferently apart from us, set apart and staring down and judging us for our unrighteousness and saying, you better get things right. And then maybe I'll give you a little bit of my presence or a little bit of my reward or a little bit of me. You better get things right. And when you get them righteous, maybe I'll do it. See, those other imaginary gods just stand there indifferently waiting as some of these characters like Job bumble their way along, maybe doing the ritual a little bit wrong, not knowing the right way to do it, indifferently watching them suffer until they get it right. But our God didn't do that. He didn't sit up there waiting for us to get it right, waiting and judging us. Instead, he came to be with us, to suffer with us, to suffer more than anybody else has ever suffered, more than that Pakistani girl, more than Job, more than any of us have done. He suffered. And he suffered with us, to be with us. A completely revolutionary idea for God, to be with us and to suffer. The shame that we think of the cross, but also God's glory. And he did that so that we can be in his presence, so that he could take away all of the strings, all of the things that challenger, that accuser says at the beginning of Job, all of the problems of religious equations, so that we could have our iniquity washed away, all of the things that keep us from God, and we could be with him in a relationship. And that relationship with him is the most beautiful thing that any of us can experience. And if you haven't experienced it today, don't wait another day to experience the relationship with God, which is the absolute best thing that can happen to you.
Amen.
Right now, you can receive his forgiveness. The work that was done on that cross, you can receive that, acknowledge it, and you can be in his presence and be washed sin-free and experience that relationship. Don't wait for that. There's no reason to wait. Don't put it off. You'll only be missing something if you do. That relationship is why God has done this, so that we could be with him. And I believe he also wants to give us his expansive perspective. Just like he gave Job a little bit of perspective. See, he didn't answer his questions. They weren't really questions you can answer. He didn't bother arguing with Job or anything. He just showed a little bit of who he was. And I believe that if he was to show us who he was, that expansive vision of his ability to work in our weakness, provide for our every need, ability to deal with our every desire, ability to give us joy in the midst of suffering, ability to take away every tear, like he promises, and give himself. That his perspective, that his long-range perspective of heaven, that he was seeing even the future for Job, he knew that he was going to give him double back. Like we read, listen to all the what was it, all the cows and all the stuff he's got? He just dumped the blessings onto Job. And he wants to dump the blessings on us. I like it when my kids watch Paw Patrol and have a good time. I like it that they have a kitten to enjoy. I want the blessings on them. He's given all of that, and he sees the future. And he sees that what we suffer is but for a moment. And what we go through is but for a moment. Instead, he wants us to enjoy a relationship here where we trust him with all the strings taken away, without this equation thinking that we'll get from God if we just give $1,000 or if we just pray hard enough or act righteously enough or do the right religious rituals. He takes all those strings away and he says, no, because of my cross you can come to me. Because I've made the way myself and suffered in your place, you can come to me. Because I wanted it to be this way, because I wanted to adopt you like a son or daughter, you can call me Father. You can call me Dad. You can love me and I can love you in a strange reciprocity where the size difference is unfathomable, undescribable. We can't really imagine how it works. But look at how Moses goes back and forth with God, how Job can go back and forth. He invites us into that relationship where we can pray to him and have a back and forth friendship with him because of what he's done. If that hasn't happened for you, I pray it can happen and start today. And if you feel like maybe I do sometimes, that you need this vision open for you, some perspective, I pray some of that can happen today, and that whatever pit maybe you're in, he can lift you out. And if you're in the opposite mode, where you feel like it's overwhelmingly going well, and maybe you don't need God, I find in those times is when the little things can become big things. He wants to take that mirror where we're staring at ourselves and just lift it away and lift our eyes to him.